There we go. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It looks like we have a pretty big crowd here. I am going to turn it over to Brooke and Jessica with OTL so that they can talk to you about accessibility in your Canvas courses.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for having us this morning to join your meeting. We're looking forward to chatting with you about this. Um, as Min said, my name is Brooke Schaefer. I'm one of the educational development specialists in the OTL, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Jess Perush. Um, so we have a few slides prepped, and then we thought just to give kind of an overview, we'll try to answer your all's questions, and then I thought we could do some demos of some of the tools that you have available in Canvas for checking for accessibility stuff. So just to kind of get started with an overview of where we're at as far as accessibility law goes and, a public institution like ours, there's a few different items that have historically been in play. One of those is of course the Americans with Disabilities Act that was enacted in 1990. That is where the Title II part lives that I know that you all have heard about. And essentially, this says that any public institution has to provide equitable access for folks regardless of disability. This is similar to the Rehabilitation Act, which covered any institutions that receive government funding. So that's where, if you've heard of Section 504 before, that is really sort of the same laws apply that these institutions must provide equitable access. And Section '08 or Section 508, sorry, was part of that as well and came a little bit later once the internet was a more widely used tool for providing information and access, and essentially also says that anything that's publicly available online must also meet online accessibility guidelines. So again, folks have that equitable access to information. And so that's where Wayne State has sort of been up until this point. Um, the current accessibility policy stated that any public facing content that the institution provided that was online needed to meet these accessibility guidelines. And so the folks that were in charge of managing web content were the folks that received this training and did this work to make sure that we were meeting that mandate. So as far as what's changing with the ADA Title II ruling, this was a ruling from the Department of Justice and essentially says that, basically the idea of equitable access to online content is going to apply regardless of whether it is public facing or if it is internal to the institution. So, we've been working primarily a lot with instructors because our office is teaching oriented. And so, for instructors, it means, any course material in Canvas. I know that you all work with students as well and have information on Canvas or other um, digital documents and things that you're sharing with them. And so that essentially means that anything that we're, using with students at this point now is going to apply to these new guidelines. So the ADA Title II has a requirement for that documents meet what's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or also known as WCAG 2.1 AA standards. Wayne State's internal accessibility requirements are for the 2.2 AA standards. There's sort of different tiers of these online standards, and the AA is kind of in the middle. I can tell you that for our purposes, like working with Canvas and primarily documents, the differences between 2.1 and 2.2 are pretty minimal. There's not a lot of changes there that are going to impact um, the content that you all have. Um, of course, the deadline for implementation is currently set for April 24th, 2026. If you have students that are, working with student disability services, none of that's going to change. All of that's still going to be available. The goal of this ruling is really to be proactive in making sure that, students that have different access needs are able to, use these your documents and access content without needing to ask for particular accommodations with that. So when we're talking about sort of the major considerations for accessible digital content, we're talking about a few different things depending on what type of content we're talking about. So if we're talking about text-based things, so whether it's Word documents, PowerPoints, information you have in Canvas, those kinds of things, we're looking at questions of using accessible formatting. So using like the actual stylized headings in documents. So not just like bolding or increasing font size, but using the actual heading stylings, using either unnumbered or numbered lists, if, to create that document structure that's sort of behind the scenes in the document, because that is helpful for students who might be using something like screen reading software where it reads, information on their computer aloud to them. That back end structuring and formatting helps the screen reader break that content down for the students. We would also be thinking about things like descriptive linking. So instead of, pasting really long URLs into our documents, that we instead link that URL to some text that describes, where that URL is going to take the student. Because if a screen reader tries to read one of those really long URLs with a bunch of letters and numbers and everything, it's really hard to understand what that is. And then they don't know where it's going to take them either. Um, some items like PowerPoint might have slightly different needs, like checking the reading order on slides to make sure that, if someone's using screen reading software, that whatever content you've got there is going to be read in the order that you intend it to be read in. And then as far as PDFs go, if you're using PDFs, we want to make sure that those are text-based PDFs and not images. And so we can talk about that more in a second. When it comes to images, so if you have any images in the content you're sharing with students, those require something that's called alternative text, which is really just a brief description of the primary content of the image, like what's important about it. And if you have images that are not necessarily important content-wise, that you're just sort of using for decoration, then you can also mark them as a decorative image, which just tells the screen reader to skip over that image. So it doesn't, it has to be one or the other, but we just don't want an image left with no description at all. And then finally, the big thing is, if you have videos for students, videos require captioning. And Wayne State does have some tools available so that if you have some videos that you need to generate captions for, there are ways to do that and make that a little bit easier. If you have them listening to audio content like a podcast or something like that, then a transcript would need to be provided. And I think at this point, most podcast platforms have those transcripts already available. So it's just making sure that students know where to go to get that. But this is kind of an overview of where we're at, but I want to pause and see what questions folks have before we go any further.
Hi, so I'm Angel. I don't want to get too in the weeds, but I was playing around with this closed caption stuff the other day. I'm curious, if I close caption a video, do I also have to have a transcript?
So generally speaking, for videos, the captions are the requirement over a transcript, just because we want those timed captions so that they're showing up, as whatever is being spoken is happening in the video.
Okay.
So that's the most important one on videos.
Thank you.
Yeah. Royanne?
Yes, in English, sometimes we have students who submit creative writing pieces. And especially when we're talking about poetry and things like this, changing, the font, formatting, different things like this. I know that, we're talking about, making things more readable. How does that happen? Like how is that scrutinized?
So generally speaking, if when it comes to screen readers do not distinguish between font size or bullets or I'm sorry, bold or italics, underlining, anything like that.
Okay.
Um, for, you know, on sort of the flip side. So for a screen reader, those things aren't necessarily going to impact it
Mm-hmm.
being read aloud. My concern there would just be making sure if they're using different types of fonts that that those are readable, because sometimes the ones with like handwriting or things like that can be
Right.
difficult for someone to read. So maybe it means if they're going to use something like that, increasing the font size so that it's clearer or something like that.
Okay, so we are required to also make those. Um, usually when it's creative writing, people don't want you to change anything. And that's my concern. I also wanted to find out, you're probably going to get into this, but how, we have this deadline of April 24th. Are you guys all going through all of our Canvas sites and looking at these things? How will you know?
So let me answer your first question first, and then we'll go to the second one. An alternative, if someone is, I also understand for artistic reasons, like folks feeling pretty strongly about how things are presented, the alternative
Mhm.
would be to just have a more plain text version of it available in case somebody needed that, and so that
Okay,
they could see it like side by side. That would be another option.
okay,
Um, Again, just some of those fonts, especially for people with dyslexia and things like that, they
yes,
can be really hard for them to read and process and things like that. So as far as the other side of things, we are not compliance officers. Our office also does not have the capacity. We are not looking at your Canvas courses. Currently, I do not know if there is any plan for that sort of thing to happen. I know that I see Sarah is here, so Sarah can maybe speak more to that part of it. But as far as I know, like there's no current plan for there to be like people going in and
okay.
surveilling people's courses. It's really still, though, ultimately the instructor's responsibility to make sure that everything meets those guidelines.
Yeah, and Darren Ellis was named by the provost. Fittingly, he's the compliance officer for the university. So he is putting together a committee with staff and faculty. So we'll hear from that soon. Everything is kind of getting organized right now. And they're going to talk more about that together. But essentially, right now, the only way that any violation of compliance would come about would be from a report from a student. So that's kind of where we stand right now.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I see Katie has her hand up.
Hello, I just had a quick question on, and then maybe we'll cover this when we were talking about closed captions versus transcripts. Does
Mhm.
the software Echo 360 provide like that closed captioning feature as well as the transcripts?
So generally, yes. If you have
Okay.
either recorded something directly into Echo 360,
Yeah,
if you've uploaded it, or if you've recorded with Zoom and linked your Zoom and
like
Echo
the
360 accounts,
yes.
it's going to generate what it calls a transcript. The only
Okay.
thing is that for those videos, you would need to go in and if you click on a video and go to like where you can view the transcript,
Yes.
you would have to click, there's a button that says apply to closed captioning.
Oh, okay.
So that's, you would want to click that, and it has the ability there if you see like errors, you know, I know sometimes
Edit.
proper names, acronyms, things like that can be tricky
Okay.
with captions, but you can make those edits right there and then click apply to closed captions.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, the really nice thing about Echo 360 is if you've already embedded videos in your content somewhere, if you do that apply to closed caption, like you don't have to reconnect the video or anything. It might take it a
Oh,
second
cool.
to like update, but
Okay.
it will just add those captions available wherever you have it embedded in your content. So
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying.
yeah.
There is a question in the chat. I understand that you guys don't have access to it, and I apologize. Is there an example of a text-based document in a format that we should be following? Is the question.
I don't know that we have an exact template per se, but we could potentially take a look at some of the tools in Word if we have time for that.
She says thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions right now? Great. All right. So from here, we're gonna do some demoing in Canvas. I did want to show you, and we will make sure that you all get these slides. We also have a list of resources available for folks. You know, we have here the announcements that have gone out about this from the university. We've been running a 5-part workshop series for sort of focusing on different types of documents and making them accessible. So those have been, you know, running and things like that. I also wanted to point out that we have the OTL Virtual Resource Hub, which is, it's really like teaching resources and things like that, but we have put together a page specifically about supporting students through accessibility that has, again, kind of an overview of all these different content types, resources for, you know, finding the best ways to make those accessible and things like that. So we will make sure to share this with you. And no, Gemini, I don't need your help right now. If you go to otl.wayne.edu, the OTL's website, there's also buttons here you can click. So if you click the virtual resource hub there, it gives you the ability to enroll. It's a Canvas-based course as well. So that's where we keep all of our resources for things like that. But I wanted us to take a look at some of the tools that we have available in Canvas, and then we can also take a look at some of the Microsoft stuff as long as we have time for things. So I'm switching over to a Canvas course that we use for our workshops that are intentionally full of accessibility errors. So we know they're there. But in Canvas, you have access to 2 different tools that you can use for checking accessibility. One of them is Canvas's built-in accessibility checker that's available really anywhere that you can be in edit mode in Canvas. And then we also have access to something currently that's called You Do It. And what it does is kind of gives a full scan of your course and helps you find things, you know, across the board. The primary limitation of both of these tools is that if you have Word documents, PDFs, or things like that uploaded into Canvas, it cannot check those. So there is a built-in accessibility checker in Microsoft tools that you can also use to check those, but it just, the ones in Canvas can't access those documents, unfortunately. So we'll take a look at the built-in accessibility checker first. So if I click into edit and come to this Canvas page, the checker lives underneath the primary text box and is this little icon of the person in the circle. And we see right now there's a number next to that. And if you see that number, that's telling you, hey, I found some things. And if I click on it and open it up, it's going to open this window on the right side of the screen. And it's going to start showing you, one, what the issue is and give you the option to correct it. So in this case, it will catch if an image does not have the proper alt text, for example. So in this case, this is an image here, and by default, if you don't give any other alt text in Canvas, it uses the image file name. And I don't know about you all, but my image file names are usually terrible. So we would want to type in something more descriptive than that into this alt text box. Or you can check this box if it's something that the content is not really important, is there for decoration. You can mark this as setting it as decorative and then click the apply button. I will say this particular image is kind of a trick question, because something like this that has this much text, we would actually say to make it accessible, you would want to make that actual text in Canvas and not share it as an image. Otherwise, other images, you can type in a brief description, click that apply button, and then it's going to be good to go. If I click the next button, it will show me other images, or other issues. In this case, it's caught these little checkbox pictures, which you could either set as decorative or replace with a bulleted list, because again, that is particular formatting that if a screen reader were reading this page aloud, it's actually going to highlight and say, this is a list, and then list those things out. It can catch issues with tables. So if you use the tables that are built into Canvas, the primary needs there are that tables should have a caption, which is essentially a title of, what the table information is about. It will also catch if there are no headers, or if there is if the header scope is not specified. And when I say scope, it's essentially saying is, this tool name here has been set as a header, but we need to know, is it a header to describe the row or a header to describe the information in the column? Because that will impact how a screen reader reads that info. So again, it'll let you say whether it'll let you set, like in this case, it's a column. We would set that and click apply and move on to the next thing. It can also catch, like here we have a list of things that have been set with asterisks instead of bullet points. So it can catch that, and you can check the box to say, make this an actual formatted list and make that change. It's also very good at catching issues with color contrast. So again, there's a specific minimum ratio for the text color versus background colors that we want to hit. And in this case, the bright green does not cut it as far as contrast goes. And the cool thing about the accessibility checker is it will not let you fail as far as making an update, because if I click and drag this around and stay in the lighter colors, we notice that the apply button's not clickable. If I move it down to something darker, now the apply button is clickable. So it literally won't let you pick a color that doesn't meet the proper guidelines. The one thing that the checker is not good at catching are issues with links. So for example, here we have a really long URL link pasted that we would want to put behind text. And the same goes here. We have an unlinked URL. And then here we have a link that is just linked with the word here, which we also don't consider descriptive enough, because if you have a bunch of links on one page that all say to go here, then someone's just going to have a list of links that all say here, 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 and it doesn't tell us enough about where we're going. You can make link changes pretty easy in Canvas. So if I highlight this text, for example, I can either go to the link icon and click external link, or you can type Control K and then paste the link into this box. And then the link is now connected to the words Canvas Accessibility Checker. And then we can delete this long URL that we don't need anymore. So that's sort of the one shortcoming of the built-in checker, is it misses things with links. Questions about how this checker works before we move on?
I just put in the chat, is there a like a guideline for how long that description should be? Like if here is not enough and the full URL is too much, like 3, 4, 5 words, or is there any guidance for that?
Generally, I mean, it depends on what the source is that you're going to, right? Because you need to be able to describe it. So a phrase is usually a good rule of thumb. If you're linking like a full sentence, that's probably too much. There is a recommended like number of characters, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But essentially, as long as you're not like linking where it's like multiple lines of text or like whole sentences, you should be in good shape with that. Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. All right. Well, I am going to close this for now, and we will go to UDoIT. UDoIT lives in the course navigation menu of your course. If you don't see this in your Canvas course, what you can do is go to Settings. And then in the Settings menu, if you click on Navigation, you want to look for UDoIT 3, which would be in this bottom list if it's not enabled. And then you can click and drag it up, or you can click on the little kebab icon on the right and click Enable. The important thing then is to scroll all the way down to the bottom and click Save. And once it saves and updates, you should see UDoIT 3 in your course navigation. The nice thing about UDoIT is that it does a fresh scan of your course every time you click on it. So you don't have to, refresh it or anything like that. And it's going to give us a message here that says it is, scanning the course content for those accessibility issues. And then it lets us know when that scan is complete. So if I click Continue, that's going to take us to the overview of what it's found in the course scan. So in this case, it says it's found 79 errors and 26 suggestions. It differentiates between what it calls errors and suggestions. I honestly would say that the overwhelming majority of the suggestions really should also be listed as errors, because if we look down there, a link having nondescript text is going to be a problem for someone who's navigating by screen reading. So that's something we would still definitely want to change and update in our courses. But it's nice because it then, breaks down what it's found in the course by the types of errors. So if I look at the summary, I see a 31 next to alternative text should not be the image file name. So that means I've got 31 images in the whole course that need some alt text. 20 instances where color alone shouldn't be used for emphasis, because color blindness is also something that can impact the way students perceive information. So we can certainly use color to convey meaning, but we want to make sure there's some other way that meaning is being conveyed as well. UDoIT will let you sort depending on what you want to look at. So you can click on these individual errors and it will take you to a list of just you know, that particular category. You can also sort over here. The default is what it calls easiest to fix. You can also sort just with errors, or say give me everything, so all open issues. You can also sort by like issue and content type. So, you know, if you just want to look at all of your assignments or something like that, or all of the pages in your course, you can sort by these different things as well. I'm going to click Get Started with the easiest to fix, and then we're going to see a list. And the first few things say link has nondescript text. If I click Review, it's going to show me on the right side of this window a preview of what it's found that it's flagged. So again, we have a link that just says the word here. Down below that preview, it's going to show you where that item is in your course. But the nice thing about UDoIT is you can make that correction right here in UDoIT. You're also able to click on the link. So if you have one where you're like, I'm not sure what this is, you can open it, look at it, and then type your new link text and click Save. And UDoIT's going to update it right where it is in your course. So you don't have to go like hunting for these different things in your course. You can make all the changes right from this same interface. At the bottom right, you again have navigation things. So I can say, go to the next issue. It's caught things with color contrast. So again, it will let you pick colors and will show you the contrast ratio and will let you know sort of when you've met that, what's appropriate and necessary for accessibility reasons. And so, yeah, so we've got all the color contrast things here. Here's one that's an example of alt text. So again, it's going to preview and show us the image on the right side. It's going to give us that text box to type in the alt text or the option to mark the image as decorative. We click Save and everything updates. So this can be a good way to kind of get the overview of the course, and it's able to catch some things that the built-in accessibility checker doesn't always catch. So they can really be good tools to use side by side. Jess likes to say that the built-in one is kind of like spell check. So it will catch, you know, if you've introduced an error or forgot to put alt text in while you're working on stuff, but UDoIT's going to be a little bit more of a comprehensive way to look at what's in the course and, you know, scan for those different types of issues that we're looking for. So what questions can I answer about UDoIT?
I also just want to remind folks, the virtual resource hub page we have about supporting students through accessibility, there is a video on UDoIT on that page, and it walks through how to add UDoIT to your course if you don't see it there, and how to run through the errors. So a demo like what Brooke just showed us.
Yeah, we've tried to record videos of all the demonstrations that we're doing on the different types of corrections and things like that. So all of that's available on that page. So what else would be helpful with the time that we have? We could take a look at some of the Microsoft tools, if that would be helpful to see what that looks like. Or I don't know if there are other particular document type questions that folks have that they'd like to look at. Yeah, Susan.
I'm just thinking a lot of the times when I write emails, I put a lot of links in. And so I've noticed that like when you were speaking, I do the here a lot, like look here for this information. So when we're doing that, I'm wondering how it shows up on their end if they were to be using a screen reader.
Yeah, so if they're using a screen reader for an email, it's going to essentially flag whatever text is linked, and then it's going to say links to an external site. So that's why here is not always the best choice, just because it's going to say here links to an external site, but it's not going to tell us what it is. So, a quick way to rephrase that might be to highlight instead the type of information that you're sending them to.
Right.
Like what we showed with like the Canvas accessibility checker. So, because then the screen reader is going to read that text and say links to an external site. So it's going to let them know that it's a link, but it's going to be more specific about where it's taking them. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for like examples of that, you can check out our virtual resource hub. All of the links that we have there are descriptive emails that the OTL sends out or the university. Just for like another example, so we often direct folks to sign up for a consult with us. So we could say, click here to schedule a consult with the OTL, and click here might be the hyperlink, but that's not descriptive. So we could just say schedule a consult with the OTL, and schedule a consult could be the hyperlinked text.
Yep. I see Jessica's got their hand up.
Yes. One question I have is using like Canva, and it has so many different, pictures and things like that, and how we should be maybe going about that. Like in a presentation, for example, I created one on like success strategies that I send out to students. I actually put it into PowerPoint, like I transferred over, but so just thoughts on that.
So if you're taking something from Canva and putting it into a PowerPoint, then it's going to be an image, I assume?
So I'm thinking maybe I have too many images, like in Canva, because there are a lot of images.
So if it's content in an image, it then kind of depends on what is contained in the image. If it's something like, if it's not a lot of text or something like that, then you could still use the alternative text description, add that in and make that available for students who need it. If it's a more complex image, like if there's a lot of text, if it's something that's more like a diagram or something like that, then the text probably needs to be in a different format where it's actual text that can be read and not as an image. So it would really depend on, the content in whatever you've got on Canva itself, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brooke, is there a way to test PDFs? Or can we I guess we can't put the link in the chat, but that would help answer those types of questions too. So then you would know if you have to do a bit of redesign on the way that you're doing PowerPoints because it's copying, pasting images from Canva. Like I know in the last session, Jess showed a PDF that we were able to tell very quickly because it blocked near, chunks of content. And it was like, oh, this is not screen reader accessible kind of a thing.
Yeah, let me grab a PDF here. And we can take a look at that. So this is a PDF of a book I think I downloaded from the library. The quickest and easiest way to check for a PDF if it's screen readable is to see if you can highlight the text or individual words. And since I can do that on this file, that tells me that this is a text-based PDF. If I were to try to highlight this text, and I just get like this sort of square blocking like what it's doing at the top of the page where there's no text, that tells me that that is an image PDF, and that PDF would need to be put through what they call optical character recognition, so OCR, in order to make it a text-based PDF so that it's readable. I see Kate has hand up.
Yes, my question was, what if, so in Canvas, let's say somebody creates a flyer for an event that we're having. And so I just put a link, like I don't make it its own page. Should I be making that a page and then describing the image of the, the PNG or the PDF, right? I'm just announcing it to the students in our, our Canvas page, like, career fair, March 5th.
Mm-hmm. So generally, if it's a flyer that's been made to be printed but still being shared digitally, then that would need to have like a text readable version. So maybe instead of adding the actual flyer, maybe it's just typing out some of the info from it. Or if it's readable, again, if the flyer has been made accessible where you can highlight the text, then you're probably in good shape. But double checking that would be important to do, just to make sure that it's not just an image, so that if someone needed that text read aloud to them, that can happen.
Thank you.
Dawn.
Hello. So kind of a general question. If I was the one that developed the Canvas course to just communicate with our department, announcements, sometimes different, attachments and so on. And I'm listed as the teacher, and I assigned all professors as, the designers, and then of course there's the students. So as the teacher, or the one that's like, overseeing the Canvas page, then is it my responsibility for anyone, because if all the professors can post things, is it their individual responsibility for them to make sure it's compliant, or do I have to check it then, every single thing that's posted, since I'm listed as the teacher, just to be compliant for our Canvas site? That's the first question.
So is this something that's being used just internally between instructors?
No, it's actually for the whole department. All of our majors are listed. So we communicate information to all of our students about, upcoming events, our guest speakers, if we're going to have a workshop, just anything, that we want our students to know.
Then in that case, I mean, all of the accessibility things apply. I would guess if you're the one listed as the primary instructor, then that might mean that you would technically be ultimately responsible. But if you're working with your colleagues and things on that, they can, everyone's going to be working on making these documents accessible and things. So I would make sure that they're aware of the guidelines too, so that you're not having to, be constantly checking. But I saw Sarah unmuted, so she may have thoughts on that.
I had a follow-up part to that, if you don't mind. But yeah, go ahead, Sarah, please.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add is just talk to everybody and say, hey, my name's listed, but you all know, I just want to make sure you're aware that this also applies to the Title II. So this also, so anything that we're inputting in here, those types of things, as you have those departmental meetings, put 5 minutes on there to do a quick check or bring something up if you've noticed something, or if it's not going to be you, maybe you decide that as a group that it's going to be somebody else, that type of a thing.
Okay, yeah, because I think that would pretty much, I mean, I don't have time to be a webmaster also, right? To kind of, edit everybody's postings. So that brings me to the other part, is all the past content that's on the Canvas page. Do we have to then go back and make sure that's all ADA compliant, or just remove it all?
So the way that I understand it is that anything that is actively in use needs to
Okay.
be compliant. So if you have
Okay.
old content that's unpublished that you're not using, if you don't want to delete it, I would say maybe move it to a practice course, but if it's not being used, it doesn't necessarily have to do that, but as people are refreshing courses from semester to semester
Mhm.
and things like that, they would need to be making those updates. So because there is an exception for archived content, and to be honest, it's kind of a gray area of what counts as archived content. But for now, if students have access to it, it needs to be accessible.
Okay. So then last thing. So instead of a Canvas site, then if we want to switch to like a listserv instead, just to have announcements, that's something that our department can then look at, I guess. So, okay. All right. I'll find out what they want to do. Thank you so much.
But just to confirm, those new announcements still need to be accessible.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Royanne?
Was actually going to piggyback on Dawn's because a lot of the advisors and academic services officers maintain undergraduate Canvas sites for their whole list of majors and sometimes minors that they use as communication tools, right? And my question was also about communication because we send out a lot of announcements and emails and things like this. And the emails are kind of, sorry, I have my camera off. The emails are kind of like, I don't know, where do they fall in on this, right? Because they're still saved in Canvas as well. And so, I haven't been checking every email that we send out because I'm basically forwarding things. And so I'm not sure, what the responsibility is there for one thing. And a lot of folks, don't realize when we're, you're used to dealing with faculty where you are the sole owner of the course, right? You don't have other people that are like I have committee work and different things like this, or we have different things too. And we also have probably there's some ADA issues in there. I was going to suggest on that maybe what we think about doing is unpublishing everything as we go through it. You know what I mean? Just unpublish everything that we're not sure about and then, republish as we go along with our reviews. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that's, go ahead,
ahead,
Sarah. No, go ahead.
You go.
You go.
Thank you. All I was going to say was, so clearly this is a whole new concern. So we primarily work with faculty and like was already mentioned, it's one instructor. So please keep talking together about those best strategies. So we have two folks that have already mentioned it. So you've probably already thinking in your heads that you all need to get a meeting together of those who are responsible for those main areas so that you can share those lessons learned and figure out solutions together. That would be something if anybody wanted to meet with me. So again, primarily Brooke and Jess are their charge is faculty, but I have a dual role, so I could continue conversations and consult with them as needed. But keep that in mind that we're going to learn some things. I know a lot of faculty, when they've brought up things that we weren't initially aware of, we've had conversations about that. We've gone to our professional organizations to find out what are they doing because they are also trying to solve these types of things as well. So keep in mind that extended reach of where you can go to find out how folks are handling this. Our best result is always going to not be, let's just take it offline. I know the unpublished was just temporarily to go through it, but we're, always thinking that it was published for a reason so that students have access to it. So, but I understand that that was just a temporary thing to go through. So if you're ever thinking that like, oh, I guess I just won't publish this anymore because it feels too hard to get it accessible, please reach out. And even though, our charge as faculty, we still want students to have everything they need, just as I know you do too. But as we all know, this is an extra thing And we all know how busy everyone is. So we definitely understand and respect that and want to be here to support as best we can with our really, really tiny, small staff. So keep that in mind that, you know, we're open to any conversation and how we might be able to help. Sorry, Brooke,
Absolutely.
that was way longer than I had anticipated.
It's all good. All good information. And I was just going to add that, you know, one of the things we've been recommending to folks as a way to kind of get started in tackling this is to go content type at a time. So maybe you go and look at all your Word documents first, or then check all of your images for alt text or things like that. So kind of taking it one at a time, because one, as you start to do it, it's going to start to go quicker. And, you know, that can be a way to kind of break all these different pieces down into, you know, more sort of achievable tasks, because I know it can feel like it's a lot of different things and there's a lot to do, but kind of going one by one is one way to try to break it down a little bit. Jessica.
You mentioned with the PDFs OCR. What is
Mhm.
that? If you could share a little bit, or if there's a resource for that we can
Yeah,
go to, please.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, so OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. It's literally the process, it's a software tool that goes through an image document and it looks for and breaks up lines of text, reads it, and then makes it like a text-based document instead of an image of text. So the Pro version of Adobe has OCR built right into it. And if you open a PDF that is not OCR'd in Adobe Pro, it immediately comes with a little pop-up that says, hey, this is an image file. Do you want to OCR this? And, you know, I don't know if you all have individual access to Adobe Pro, but we do have it on our computers in the OTL lab. So if you had some PDFs, you can come to our lab and tackle those that way. We also have a link on the accessibility page. If I go down to accessible PDFs, there's a little info here again about how do I determine. A couple of other options are to check Wayne State's library holdings to see if there is an updated accessible digital version of it available, because then what you could do is essentially provide the permalink to that resource instead of having to fix your old PDF. So that's one option. There's also a link on this page to Adobe's online tool. It's free to use, but it does require you to either sign up with Adobe or use a Google account to get access to it. So all I can say to that is I have no idea what they may or may not do with your data, but that is available and it will let you upload like a document at a time and it will try to do the OCR on it so that it is a readable text document. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we are coming up on the last few minutes here. John, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I have much content for an introductory geology lab that's all in Chrome screencast. Do you have any things that can help convert these videos that are in Chrome screencasts to make them accessible?
That is a great question. I personally have not worked with Chrome screencasts very much. Are you able to like download those as like an MP4 file or something?
I believe I might be able to.
Okay. So one option would be to take those MP4s and either put them in Echo 360 that we talked about earlier,
Okay.
or you could upload them to your OneDrive, because the if you put videos into your Microsoft OneDrive account, you get access to the old stream tools, and it has the ability to generate captions for that video, and then you could, you know, share the link to your students, just like you would share the link to any other Microsoft document that you have. So that's, you know, something that we could also probably chat more about. And I can, we have resources about using Echo 360 in the virtual resource hub as well. So that could help you get started with just, you know, uploading and getting those captions added.
Has there been anything, or have you heard of anything for these screen readers and everything like that to make it accessible? With all the AI, is there anything that's like making these screen readers have the ability to read documents that have different fonts, or because you would think AI would be able to compensate for that? For the artistic, if someone's put colors and stuff, that the AI would automatically, in these readers for people, that would automatically correct it for them. So
Not that I am aware of. I mean, for some folks, you know, that information just isn't going to have as much meaning, especially if it's someone who's colorblind, like describing
Right.
different colors to them. You know, so I think the focus there is more on the text itself and not so much font choices and things like that. I
Okay.
mean, I don't know what could happen down the road, but as I understand it, you know, the primary reason that these screen reading software tools were built was for you know, getting readable text that can, you know, text that can be read aloud. And that's why the other formatting things that we talked about, like using the headings, is really important, because those things a screen reader can cite. Like it will say, here's a heading 2 on this topic. And then if there are subtopics within that, it can say this is a heading 3 and things like that. So it gives honestly more like structural context than changing a font style would.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. There is, if you wanted to hear for yourself what some of your documents sound like, Canvas does have a built-in immersive reader that that's usually available up next to the student view button. So you can listen to your content as Canvas can play it. There is also a screen reader software that is open access that's called NVDA. And I think the website is nvdaccess.org, and it's something that you can download on your computer. If you're just curious and want to know more about like what it sounds like and how it works with different documents and websites and things, that's something that you can also play around with. I think we are just about at our time for today. So are there any sort of last lingering questions that we can answer right now?
Lots of comments in the chat about how great the info was. So thank you so much for carving out the time to do this for the advising community. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help.
Oh, looks like Dawn has one. Dawn, do you have one more question?
Nope, sorry, I meant to react with a hand clapping
Oh.
instead.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, they can't see the chat, but everyone's saying how helpful it was. So thank you so much. And I will get this recording out, and I did drop the PowerPoint in the chat, but I'll make sure that the PowerPoint goes out with the recording as well for the advising community. So awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much. You too. Take care.